The Miniature Railway Adventures, The Phantom of the Mine, written by White House Films and Casey Jr. Fog proved to be tricky stuff for the members of the Model Engineer Society to work through. Only the fainted glow of the station and yard lamps proved to be of any use as the trains made their way along the line. At times, it can be very dangerous when travelling with a full train when the fog gets thick, so the drivers sound their whistles to warn anyone that they are coming and need their paths cleared. On such a morning, Casey was heading down towards Pine Tree Halt with an empty train to fill up on coal. As he was slowly approaching Bog Halt, he hit a bad bit of track and felt a sudden jerk behind Lady Grange. To his surprise, Casey found that his coaches had broken away. The spring clip in his coupling pin must not have been put on right when he was being coupled up. Oh, I wish those young members would remember to put those clips back when using the coaches, Casey sighed. We're always losing them. He stopped Lady Grange and reversed back to collect his train. But he never found it. Come to think of it, the line seemed to run longer than he thought, and a bit more overgrown. Suddenly, the tender dropped, and Casey found himself running backwards down a gradient. He must have come off the line at some point and hadn't noticed it. No, his engine was still on a set of rails, but where were they taking him? Trees and branches were swept aside as Lady Grange rolled on, till... bump! Casey hit a set of buffers and came to a sudden stop. Sitting back up in his cab seat, he looked around to see where he was. The fog was still thick, and it was hard to make out any of the shapes that silhouetted in the faint glow of the sun. Casey picked up Lady Grange's oil lamp and shone it around the area. It was a small yard, with a few sidings in places, and a small turntable. I've never seen this place before, Casey said to himself. I don't think any of us has seen it, or even heard about it from any of the older members. He walked around to get a better idea as to where he was round the club. He looked up and stared at the wall of rock that towered over him. The light from his lamp reflected off something metal, and he could vaguely make out the side of the retaining wall located near the loading ramps. A waterfall made from the nearby river trickled down the rock face quietly to a small pool at the end. For years, Casey had always wondered what was down there, and now he had found out. Shining his lamp around again, Casey found something else. A tunnel. It was made inside the rock face, and the rails seemed to run into it. There must have been a mine underneath the railway, and no one knew about it. But what were they mining for? Just as he was thinking about this, something caught Casey's eye. A light. A small light shining deep in the tunnel. It was getting bigger and brighter. Whatever could it be? A train? Nah, it can't be. I mean, who would be down here running a train? Casey went over to his engine and sounded the whistle to get the attention of the moving light. Hello, he called out into the tunnel. Who's that? Are you lost? There was no reply. The light was still a good distance away, but it was still getting bigger and more brighter. Then it split into two lights. Now Casey could hear the sound of hissing and clanking as whatever it was getting closer and closer. Something else was showing from underneath the lights, but Casey couldn't make it out clearly. It was something white and pointy. Lamp irons? No. A bit of loose rock? Possibly. Or maybe... No, it couldn't be. It was. Teeth! Gasped Casey. It was. A set of razor-sharp teeth showed clearly from the light of his oil lamp, and the two lights above looked like eyes. Casey closed his eyes, thinking his mind was playing tricks on him, but when he opened them again, the mysterious specter had stopped just a few feet from the tunnel mouth, hissing quietly. Hello? Casey was just about to say. A burst of orange flames erupted from the side of the mysterious being, and lit it up in its full horrifying glory as it howled the most frightening growl, which made Casey turn white as snow. Dropping his oil lamp on the ground in shock, Casey leapt into his engine's cab and drove off as fast as he dared, hoping that the monster wasn't following him. Meanwhile, Whitehouse was making his way down the line with a set of wagons to be delivered to the workshops. He noticed Casey's coaches was blocking his path, but with no Casey. What's he playing at? Whitehouse grumbled as he walked to the front of the train. Casey should have known not to leave rolling stock on the main line. He was just about to move the coaches out of the way when he heard a frantic whistle coming towards him. Then Lady Grange burst out of the hedgerow and sped off down the line. "Casey!" Whitehouse called after him, but Casey had already disappeared round the bend. Cars was with Corpse running a boiler test on an engine he had just fixed for a member when they heard Lady Grange's whistle shrieking loudly. They turned round to find her hissing and still whistling fit to burst past the carriage sheds, the workshops, and into the steaming bay. "Casey, stop!" Cars called out and leapt towards the engine. Casey applied the brakes and came to a skidding stop next to Cars. He panted rapidly as he remained seated in his cab. "Now what's all this then?" Cars asked. "You know better than to go at speeds like that in this weather." Casey? Casey, you're listening to me?" Casey didn't say anything. He only turned round in his seat and looked back up the line, and then sighed with relief. "Are you alright?" asked Corpse. Casey slowly nodded as his cap draped over his brow. "It's gone," he said at last. Cars and Corpse looked at each other, confused. "What has?" Cars asked. Casey was just about to reply when something bumped into the back of Lady Grange. Casey shrieked as he leapt out of his cab and ducked for cover. "What are you getting all worked up about? It's only Whitehouse," said Cars. Casey crawled out from underneath the bench sheepishly to find Whitehouse standing behind his engine with his coaches. Yes, well, he said, brushing some soot off his shirt. "I was, just practicing my escape routine if I was to be involved with a head-on collision with another engine." "While remaining static? Sure, that'll come in handy one day," joked Whitehouse. "But seriously though, what was the deal with you leaving your train on the main line like that, and what were you doing in the hedgerow?" Casey looked back up the line. You mean you didn't see it?" he asked. "See what?" said Corpse. "There's naught to see with all this fog in the way." Casey moved Lady Grange into his siding and beckoned the three to the clubroom, still looking up the line. "An old mine, did you say?" Cars asked, over a cup of tea. "I never seen anything of that on any of the maps." "That's not what I'm worried about, though," said Casey. "While I was down there, I think I may have awakened the spirit of an old mystical creature that lived down in the mine. Maybe that's why it closed. The miners must have awakened it from a long period sleep and has let all hell loose." "You've been watching too many Simon Queen movies again, haven't you?" "I know what I saw," Casey insisted. "It had glowing yellow eyes, rows of sharp teeth, and it breathed fire." "Can it do nuts with its teeth, then?" Whitehouse laughed. Casey glared at him. "You must have imagined it, Casey," Jane said from the counter. "The fog has been known to play tricks on folk. Makes one think that they're not alone when really they are." "My vision was absolutely clear. I saw a phantom in that mine tunnel, and I'm not taking any more trains until the fog clears. Understand?" And with that said, Casey walked over to the other end of the room and sat by the television. "It's best thing to leave him be for a while," Jane advised the three. "I'll give him a cup of tea and one of my cream scones. That should settle him down a wee bit." "Well, if he's not going to do passenger runs, I'll have to find a relief driver," Cars couldn't help saying aloud. Casey ignored him. "In all fairness, though," he whispered to Whitehouse, "I hardly think anybody would want to ride the trains today, what with all this fog floating about." "You coming, Corpse?" Be with you in a sec, Cars," Corpse called after him. He went over to the map of the line's route and looked at the area where Casey stated he went off. There was nothing that gave any signs of any extra rails, but Corpse decided to have a look through some of the club's archives and see what they say about any mysterious lines. Casey slumped back and relaxed on the sofa while he watched the television. The weather forecast was just coming on the afternoon news, and he wanted to know what the weather was going to be for the evening. "So, for today, there will be a weather warning for heavy fog, which will take its course around most of the UK, with 1 or 2 showers moving in from the east onwards. Later on this evening, they'll be pretty much the same, and will continue on until tomorrow afternoon. That's our weather for today, but any updates will be displayed at 6:30. Back to you, John, in the studio." Thanks, Joan. Now, to recap on this morning's headlines regarding the robbery of a priceless collection of jewellery which has been taking place earlier this week. Police say that they are on the trail of 2 suspects believed to be located somewhere near... Casey switched off the TV and let his head drop on the headrest. He sighed as he gazed up at the ceiling. "I know I saw something in that tunnel. I just know I did," he said quietly. Whitehouse was shunting Casey's coaches back into the carriage shed and went back up the line to collect his trucks, which were still blocking the main line. He left red lanterns at each end of the train to prevent any accidents, which was very unlikely as Puffer was the only engine on the line. The fog was still thick as ever and the sunlight grew dimmer and dimmer as Puffer backed into the towering shadows of the forest edge. Whitehouse looked back and saw the red lanterns shining brightly by the line side. He was just about to slow down when a sudden swerve threw him off his driving truck. Whitehouse rolled along the ballast until he came to the edge of the grass verge. He picked himself up and looked around. Puffer had vanished into thin air. Where did his engine go? Then Whitehouse heard something from nearby. It was faint, but sounded like something ramming into something. Whitehouse picked up one of his lanterns and changed the lens to white. He shone it down the track to where he had fallen off. Something was in the middle of the track. It looked like a point blade. There was a good deal of moss, but as soon as Whitehouse had cleared it away, there was indeed some point blades. A set of points in the middle of the main line? Whitehouse had read about railways having catch points before, but he never thought they had been used on miniature railways. He then found out that they weren't catch points, but actually ones that led into another track. This must have been where Casey came off, Whitehouse thought. I wonder if... He moved back a few branches that covered the path and found more rails leading away from the main line. I'd better inform Cars about this, he said, and hurried off to fetch him. Cars made his way down the hidden line with Whitehouse following behind. As soon as they reached the bottom, they found Puffer in one of the sidings. A buffer stop had stopped him from rolling away, but his wheels were still turning as the power was still on. While Whitehouse saw to his engine, Cars found Casey's oil lamp lying outside the tunnel shaft. This must have been where he saw his phantom. It doesn't look much. Mind you, if we were to restore all this, this'll be an excellent place to keep all our rolling stock. The shed's are getting quite full right now. Carr switched on the torch on his mobile phone and shot it into the tunnel. Seems dry enough in here. No water leakages or anything like that. We could also store the coaches in here too. Well, at least it gives me something to do other than waiting for passenger trains to finish, agreed Whitehouse. What do you think they were mining in here for? I don't think it's an actual one. It's more like a replica for shows and that there. You know how the museum holds these wee special events and all. This must be an old derelict version. Hey, what's this? What is it? I don't know. Hang on to this. Cars gave Whitehouse the torch and scraped away a bit of rubble. Something shone from underneath it. Cars picked the object out and brought it into the light. It was a ring. A gold ring with a large diamond. Well, and here's us thinking rings came from the jewelers, chuckled Whitehouse. Look, there's another, and another. There must be hundreds of them, Cars said amazed. Let's take a handful and take them back to show the others. As the two made their way back up the hill, they were unaware of the presence of two figures lurking in the shadows. As soon as the boys were out of sight, they moved out into the open. Why'd you have to let them find part of the loot like that? One said. I told you to fix the hole in the bag, but would you listen? Look, shut up and let me think. Now, after finding those lot, they'll be back for more, so we better prepare ourselves for the return of our guests. Jane gazed in wonder at the rings Whitehouse and Cars brought back with them. Aren't they just wonderful? She said, trying a few on. Cars grabbed her hand and plucked the rings off one by one, much to Jane's disappointment. Now, don't get too excited, Jane, he said. There might be more of this stuff down there, so we need to think of this one very carefully. We don't want loads of people knowing that there's a mine full of diamond rings and gold charms. We'll dig out what we can, and then see if we can sell it and earn a bit of money. Will the club get a share? I mean, it was found on their grounds, after all, asked Whitehouse. I'll see to it that everyone has an equal share of the takings, including the club, Carr stated. What about the Phantom, though? Did you see it? Case, me and Cars have been down that line for the last 20 minutes. If there'd been a Phantom, we would have known about it by now. You sure? Whitehouse sighed. Well, if you're not convinced, why don't you come down and give us a hand and see what else is in there? I know what's in there, and I saw it with my own eyes. Well, until you change your mind and grow up a bit, we'll head on down there. If you want to join us, you're more than welcome too. Come on, you lot, said Cars, and they led the way towards the turn-off, with the others following behind. Casey stood for a second or two, thinking over his choice. He soon came to the decision that he would stay put. Ah, sod it, he thought to himself, and sprinted after the others. Carr shone his torch into the tunnel shaft, then slowly made his way in. The others turned on their torches and did the same. Well, 3 of them did. "Are you coming, Case?" asked Corpse. Casey stood at the portal of the tunnel and peered in. I think I better check and see if Lady Grange is all right." "Casey!" "Coming," Casey sighed, as he followed the others deep into the shaft. The 2 thugs watched them from nearby, as the glow of Casey's torch disappeared in the tunnel. "But they'll find the rest of the loot," one of them said. "Why'd you just let them do that?" "Because it'll save us the trouble trying to find the stuff again, after we buried it to hide it from the cops. They'll do all the work, and all we need to do is, see to it it's in safe hands for their journey back." But they won't just give it to us." "But maybe at gunpoint they will." The second thug pulled out a gun and cocked it. His colleague forced it from his hands and disarmed it. "The last thing we want is a murder charge as well as a robbery." No. I've a better idea that should be more simpler." The 5 gazed in wonder at the many jewels and pearls that shone from the light of their torches. There were diamonds and rubies as far as their eyes could see. Jane's heart thumped rapidly. It was like all her dreams had come true in one swoop. "Right, gather as much as you can, guys," Carr said, as he handed them each a sack. Jane jumped in and gathered up as much hidden treasure as she can, until the sack was nearly ready to burst. Casey was still a bit uneasy as he picked up a few necklaces. He thought he saw something move in the shadows. Something scurrying through the tunnel. Guys, I think we should head back now," he said, in a nervous tone of voice. "Not yet, Case. I've still got this lot to get through," said Whitehouse. "But there's something over there. Look!" A stone fell to the ground. The others fell silent with an instant. Corpse shone his torch over to see what it was. Something moved. "There!" yelled Casey. "Hey, it's the Phantom! Didn't I tell you?" "Hang on, I think I got a cornered," Carls called over. He turned on his torch to the creature and stared. "Tell her there were nothing more than bones coated in castor oil. That should put him off." "Case." All right, if you want to go out this way, why don't you send out for a large order of fries to go on the side of barbecued railwaymen, grilled with Welsh charcoal." "Case!" "What?" Cars nodded him over to his creature. Casey stared, and then hesitated. "Well, he said, looking at the little field mouse on the ground. For a field mouse, I'm sure it could pass for a monstrous pest." "Look, are we just going to talk about monsters and phantoms, or are we going to get the slots shifted?" Corpse asked, annoyed. But before the others could reply, something large appeared behind Corpse. Its yellow eyes gazed down on him, while droplets of drool plopped onto his club's jacket. Slowly, Corpse turned round and gazed open-mouthed at the creature. "Corpse!" stuttered Casey. It's not the Phantom, Case. It's not the Phantom," Corpse said very calmly through deep breaths. "Corpse? Yes. It's the Phantom!" Fire blasted out of the mouth of the beast as the 5 ran helplessly through the passages of the mine shaft. Casey and Jane went down one shaft while Carr's Corpse and Whitehouse went down a different one. Unfortunately for them, it led to a dead end. Casey and Jane burst out of the tunnel mouth and fell onto the damp, wet ballast outside, breathing heavily. I think we lost it," gasped Casey. He sat up and looked back in the tunnel mouth, and he sighed with relief. He turned to Jane, who was slowly picking out bits of mud from her hair in disgust. But where were the others? Jane noticed it too. They both looked round, then looked back into the tunnel. You don't think..." Casey began. Jane hurried over to the tunnel mouth, but Casey grabbed her and pulled her back. "Hey! What are you doing?" she protested. "We've got to save the others. It's too late, Jane. There's no hope that any of them would have survived. I'm sorry." Jane looked at Casey in disbelief, then back into the tunnel. "You're wrong," she said. "I'm sure there's still hope for them. Jane, that thing would have eaten them by now, and would already be looking for us right now as its main course. Did you even get a good look at that thing?" "Enough to confirm me that it's still real, and it's not real. And so But what? It's not real. But you saw..." "Yes, but what I saw was something far from what you said it was." Casey eyed Jane suspiciously. Such as? It had a head inside its mouth. Casey went a very pale shade of green. Oh my God, it must have already gotten somebody. Poor soul, he said. Jane sighed. Not that sort of head, Casey, she explained. I mean the head of somebody controlling it. It was nothing more than a luminous puppet, like those they use at Chinese festivals. Casey thought about this, and then he understood what Jane meant. There was a sort of cheap look to his phantom, and he had to agree that Jane must be right, that their friends were still safe. But for how long? Well, we better go back in there and find them, Casey stated, and slowly he and Jane proceeded again into the mine. Corpse's eyes strained to focus on the light of the torch shining on him as the bags covering his and his colleagues' heads were removed sharply. Their hands and legs were cable tied together, and they were sitting uptight against the stone wall. Lit candles were placed around the small room, dimly lighting it enough for them to see each other. The first crook stepped forward. Well, 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 he said. What do we have here? Some young treasure hunters who thought they struck gold, but were really helping us in our plans. Thank you for doing the dirty work for us. What? So this isn't a jewel mine? Cars asked. Both crooks laughed hysterically. Their laughter echoed through the shaft till it reached Casey and Jane's ears. This way, Casey whispered, and they moved quietly towards the voices. They were now just around the corner to where their friends were held. You really think this place holds the source of wealth and riches? The second crook said, after wiping his eyes. After we raided the jewelers in town, we stashed them here for the time being, till the fuzz calmed down. After modifying a dragon we nicked from the local takeaway, we warned off any trespassers, such as your little puffball friend. And then you lot came along. What do you think we should do to him? He said to the first crook. He quickly drew out his gun and pointed to them. Shall I take them out for you? No, shooting them will be too easy. We'll gather the stuff and seal the entrance. Death by starvation will be much more slower and more painful. Disappointed, the crook put his gun away slowly. Casey and Jane knew they had to work fast. I've got an idea, Casey whispered to Jane. You'll need to act as a distraction. Why me? Asked Jane. Because it's my plan and I know what to do. Listen, inside the workshops is a miner's helmet and some gear. Put it on you, and whilst you're out there, get a tin of white paint from the storerooms and bring it to me for at the workshops. Once you get back here, distract the robbers long enough with the story of the banshee. The banshee? Yeah, it goes like this. You can't do this to us, protested Corpse. He's right, you know, agreed Whitehouse. The others will have contacted the police by now and looking for us. We'll be long gone before they even leave their base, the first crook chuckled, walking towards them with a few oily rags. Yanking each of their heads back, he stuffed the cloth into their mouths. The taste was awful. That should keep you quiet until then, he said. Just as they were about to leave, footsteps could be heard. Someone's coming! Exclaimed the first crook. He and the second one dropped the sacks, blew out the candles, and stood against the entrance of the room. Jane, wearing the miner's hat and clothes, entered the room slowly, checking that all was clear. The three tried to get her attention, but she was unable to see or hear them. She could just see the sacks in front of her, and was just about to pick one of them up when the first crook jumped out of hiding and pointed his gun at her. Hold it right there, he said. Jane gasped and turned round. She quickly raised her hands, then quickly started to think about what voice to use. What are you two doing down here? She said, in a sort of prospector-type voice. I would ask the same question, the second crook said. Well, I'm mining here, of course, replied Jane. But this mine has been closed for years. Well, I slept in. That was the best Jane could think of. Give me one good reason I shouldn't pop a cap in your head, mister, threatened the first crook. Jane thought hard. What was it that Casey told her? Because I'm here to warn you of the banshee. The what? Both crooks said. You mean you never heard about it? Jane lowered her hands and put them by her sides. Look, we don't have time for silly games, the second crook said, getting restless. Now, calm yourself, my friend, the first crook said smoothly. Let's hear what our friend has to say. He pointed something to his colleague, and then winked to him, to which he understood. Not noticing this, Jane took a deep breath and began. Well, once upon a time, this was a real mine, and this mine, believe it or not, mined gold. "Gold?" exclaimed the crooks. "Gold?" exclaimed the others. "Yes, sirree, Bob, gold. And this little railway was part of a mining company owned by Arthur James. A fine man he was, too. The little trains used to haul the ore from here to the smelters where the museum is now, on top of yonder hill. Now, in 1921, the railway took delivery of a new 060 locomotive named Jenny Rose, but we used to refer her as the Banshee, due to her high-pitched whistle. She was the biggest engine in the fleet and Arthur's favourite steamer. Her driver was the legendary Freddie MacDonald, a real man made of iron, and he and Jenny worked from dawn till dusk, 6 days a week, all year round, without any fuss. But on the night of the 28th of October, 1924, Freddie and Jenny met their horrible fate. The miners had dug shaft number 4 too deep, and the ceiling of number 5 collapsed just as Freddie and his engine were pulling a long line of gold hoppers through the shaft. Just before the end came, Freddie gave a loud, long whistle to warn fellow colleagues of the danger. The whistle sounded like a real banshee cry. Freddie was killed instantly, and when they recovered the pieces of the engine, they found that she was damaged beyond repair. The mine closed shortly after the accident due to bankruptcy, and the engine's remains were sold for scrap. But every year since that crash, on the night of the 28th of October, the ghost specters of Freddie MacDonald and the Banshee roam the mine shafts, looking for the gold they lost in the accident, killing anyone that they suspected of stealing their train. And believe it or not, that anniversary happens to be tonight. "Quick! Let's leave the stuff and escape while we can," the second crook said, a bit overdramatic. At first, Jane thought she won them over, but when she saw them moving closer, she thought otherwise. "Cut the axe, sunshine," said the first crook, whipping off Jane's helmet. "But I do hate stopping someone's performance being done so dramatically well." Jane cursed under her breath as the second crook proceeded to cable tie her hands behind her back. "You'll never get away with this. The police will be here soon. And Casey's still out there. He'll catch you," she said. "The cops will never get here in time. And as for your steam friend, he can try and take us down, but when he sees that we've got you as a hostage, he'll have to obey orders." Jane tried to protest, but she was quickly gagged by an oily rag and pushed over to the room's entrance. The two crooks made their way out with the jewels and Jane, while the others watched on helplessly. They tried to free themselves, but it was no use. The crooks made their way towards the exit of the mine, with Jane still struggling and protesting. But just as they were near the exit, a strange noise could be heard. The crooks froze and listened. "What's that noise?" the first crook said. "It sounds like a locomotive, but it can't be." The noise got louder and louder, and a beam of light then appeared before them. It got brighter and brighter before an ear-piercing whistle sounded around them. "What the hell?" the crooks exclaimed. Then, much to their surprise, a white steam locomotive rounded the curve into the mine, hissing and clanking towards them. Its headlamps shined brightly, and its safety valves whooshed while sparks shot out of the engine's funnel. It kind of looked like Lady Grange, but it was glowing a pale green sort of white. The engine stopped a few feet away from them, its drain cocks hissing quietly. The crook turned to Jane and removed the gag. "Is this some kind of joke?" he demanded. Jane said nothing. She was completely fixed on the engine and didn't move a muscle. "I bet she has that steam brat who was his engine pretend to be that so-called ghost," said the first crook. The second crook picked up a stone and tossed it at the engine. It went right through it. Did you see that?" he exclaimed. He slowly went over to the engine and touched it. He jumped back in alarm as the engine gave a banshee cry on its whistle and hissed steam angrily at him. The noise was so loud that cars, corpses, and whalers could hear it. They wondered what was going on. Suddenly, the roof above them shook, and something fell onto the ground in front of them. "Whew! Oh, what are the chances, eh?" Casey chuckled when he realized where he was. He took out his penknife and freed the others. "What's going on, Case?" Cars asked. "I'll explain later," Casey said. "Where's Jane?" "What the actual heck?" the first crook gasped. A ghostly voice boomed around them. "Who are you?" A pasty-looking figure emerged from the cab of the engine. It glared at the crooks with a sickening stare. With the crooks distracted, Jane made a run for it round the bend.
Freddie MacDonald?
"You tried to steal my gold, didn't you?" said the spectre. "I don't like thieves, and thus shall have to pay the price." Freddie leaned back in his cab, and with a hiss, the engine started moving towards the crooks. It accelerated faster with every wheel turn. "Let's get out of here!" yelled the first crook, and sprinted in the direction Jane went. His colleague didn't hesitate. Jane was running out of breath, and looked back to see if she was a good distance away. She yelped as a hand reached out and grabbed her. It was Cars. "Jane, where have you been?" he asked. Before Jane could reply, they heard shouting and screaming coming towards them. "They're coming back," said Corpse. "Now what are we going to do?" "I think I've got an idea," Carr said, spying the puppet on the floor nearby. The two crooks pelted down the tunnel till they reached the room where the others had been. They were unaware that the ghost engine had vanished before they reached the room. Both of them were nearly out of breath and white as sheets. I think we lost it," the first crook panted. "For a trick, that girl really made that story pay off. Talking of which," he looked around him, "where did she go? More to the point, where did the rest of those brats go?" "Maybe the ghost engine got them," his colleague whispered worryingly. "Don't be stupid. You're starting to believe that trick now. They shouldn't be far." He looked over to the second crook, who was frozen on the spot and looking even more paler. "What's the matter with you now?" the first crook asked, but felt a drop of drool fall onto his leather jacket. Slowly he turned round and came face to face with a pair of yellow flaming eyes. There was an almighty roar as fire shot out in all directions of the beast. The crooks sprinted off again down the tunnel, dropping the sacks along the way. They both looked back to see if they were clear from the monster, when suddenly they felt a pair of hands grab them. The police had only just arrived and had now apprehended the crooks. They fought against their strong grip, but it was no use. A few officers and the inspector went down the tunnel where they found our friends safe and sound. "Well done, you lot. We've been looking for these two for some time now. Almost gave up hope." He looked at the puppet of the beast. "I'm sure the takeaway shop owner will be pleased to know that a shop sign played part in catching them crooks." "Well, it may have given Casey a few scares, but at least he made up for it in the end," chuckled Corpse. Casey had to agree with him. "Well, I think we better get this lot back to where they belong, don't you think?" the inspector said, picking up the sacks. "I bet there'll be a reward in it. You mark my words." The five chuckled as they helped the police move the stolen jewellery outside. "There's one thing I must ask," the inspector said, rather puzzled. "When we caught those crooks, they mentioned something of a ghost train. I don't think you lot know anything about that, would you?" "Not that we know of," said Cars. "Oh well, good work all the same," said the inspector, and he made his way up the hill. The five made their way back up to the clubroom. Cars looked at Jane, who was looking rather smug. "Has this ghost train got anything to do with you, Jane?" he asked. "Well, you could say that," smiled Jane. "Before I came to distract the crooks, Casey and I came up with a plan to scare them. We made up the story about that ghost engine, and Casey did up Lady Grace to look like it. Ha! You should have seen their faces when Casey turned up. I think they nearly wet themselves." Her laughter trailed off as Casey looked at her confused. "Wait a second, Jane. What are you on about?" he asked. "Sure, don't you remember, Case? You said you would paint her up to look like that ghost engine and use her to scare the crooks off." The five then arrived at the workshops, only to find Lady Grace sitting in her siding, where she had been since earlier that day. But hang on. Didn't I not see—" said Jane. "I couldn't have done it, though, Jane," Casey explained. "That paint you gave me was all dried up, and I couldn't use it." "But if Lady Grace wasn't the ghost, then who was it we heard in the mine?" asked Corpse. Suddenly, a loud, shrieking whistle was heard. The five turned round, and slowly emerging from the opposite side of the mine line, they could see the glowing figure of the banshee. It was coupled up to a train of trucks, overflowing with gold ore. Then, with one more loud whistle, the ghost engine vanished, having now succeeded on retrieving its lost train. Did I just see?" Whiter said slowly. But it can't be," said Casey. "I made that whole story up." It was a very quiet evening as the five went back to close up the club. Afterwards, no one mentioned anything about ghosts for some time, and things went back to the way they were. The old line was reopened to the club and is now used to store any rolling stock that was taken up room. Although the five didn't know that the spirit had moved on, every year since their adventure, on the same date, the five stay clear of the old mine line, in case they do come across any strange encounters of the unknown.